I'm here to talk to you about a special bed and breakfast that was created in the late 70s by a gentleman named Dr. John Gottman out of the University of Washington State. Dr. Gottman created this bed and breakfast in a search to find what is it that differentiates the masters of marriage from the disasters of marriage. In this bed and breakfast, he instructed couples to come with their favorite newspapers, their favorite music. Today he would tell them to bring their iPads and their computers. I'm sure since the 70s a Wi-Fi has been installed, and they've been instructed to have just act the way they normally would act. Holter monitors were hooked up to their bodies in taking accurate and continuous recordings of their heart rates. At the end of each day, blood work has been taken in order to assess their immune responses. Urine samples were taken in order to assess stress levels of hormones in their urine, and in the bed and breakfast through a one-way mirror, the researchers were standing there recording every single nuance of everybody's movements, everybody's facial expressions that were being observed. Now that's kind of like a bed and breakfast, but not really one that we would like to go to. Dr. Gottman has revolutionized the study of marriage, and he's been recognized for it worldwide. Now when I ask you to share with the person sitting next to you the most favorite marriage advice they've ever been given, whether it came from their bubby or from their zadie or from their aunt or uncle, describe to the person you're sitting next to the most favorite or your least favorite marriage advice that didn't quite work. Now, in doing so, you'll realize that this is only advice from one person. The information that I'm going to share with you today is strictly objective in nature and backed by empirical data that the Gottmans have collected and have been sharing with the world. The Love Lab was actually the name of that bed and breakfast. And what happened in the Love Lab was over 3,000 couples have been studied and researched. As a result of the Love Lab, the Gottmans produced a book called The 7 Principles That Make Marriage Work. I am here to share with you some of that theory, and more importantly, I'd like you to watch this video and take away a practical piece of advice that can help you immediately in the moment. The theory produced was the sound house relationship, the sound relationship house. And we're going to focus today on one aspect of that house, and that is managing conflict and making what's called repair attempts. In Dr. Gottman's research, he has noted that he can predict divorce with 91% accuracy. That's pretty amazing, because if we can predict divorce with that amount of accuracy, then we can also stop divorce. Couples that have taken these interventions and used them have actually saved their marriages, and not just saved their marriages, but are flourishing as happy couples today. Based on the observations in the Love Lab and the patterns that emerged from those observations, and the Gottmans discovered the differences between the masters in relationships and the disasters in relationships. And they've taken a lot of data on what not to do and on what to do and what to try to create a formalized program for in order to help other couples. Couple interactions were taken out of that Love Lab, communication patterns, and overall satisfaction between those interactions were recorded. So why do most relationships fail? Why do most relationships fail in therapy? And the research suggests that that happens because individuals are taught to use what's called active listening. Now, active listening is a good skill. However, the responsibility in active listening is only placed on the listener. Now, the listener is solely responsible for that interaction. What the Gottmans have discovered is that the responsibility needs to shift a little bit, and that needs to shift onto the speaker. Because when we only shift the responsibility onto the listener in their own mind is saying, well, what I'm really hearing you say, and they self-interpret. However, I'm going to share with you an intervention to target this very specific problem of why most relationships fail in therapy. Successful conflict resolution is not the primary factor in making marriages succeed. So then what is? Right? That's a great question. What is? I'd love to know. So what does make marriage work? And what makes marriage work is building a friendship, positive sentiment override, which is basically filling up that bank account with positive emotions, not leaving the bank account in the red. And when you have a bank account that's overflowing with positive emotions, sometimes you might have to take a withdrawal, and that's really going to be okay because it's overflowing with positive sentiment override. And what we're going to focus on today are repair attempts, specifically harsh startup. Other variables that make marriage work include acknowledging that not all problems are solvable. When I read this, I was relieved. 69% of marital conflict is unresolvable. I'm going to say it again. 69% of marital conflict is unresolvable. So then the question becomes, what do I do with that massive building that's sitting on top of me? And what I do with that is, we don't have time for this aspect today, but what I do with that is we teach you how to communicate, how to make your partner feel validated, how to make your partner feel respected. Variables that really matter that the masters in relationships were using. And finally, teaching creating a culture or a climate of honor and respect. Also a very important component to making marriage work. In talking about harsh startup, Dr. Gottman's data revealed that 96% of the time, conversations that begin with a harsh startup end negatively. Look what happened in last week's portion in the Torah. Yosef is met with his brothers and explaining his dreams to them. In one of the psukim, he actually talks about one of the dreams, and in that pasuk, it's noted the word hine 3 times. In another pasuk, he's explaining the second dream, where twice the word hine is mentioned. So does this word hine allude us to? And what it does is the Meshech Chachma notes that the word hine is a happy, it denotes happiness. And the way that he described the dreams was in a boastful and happy manner. And finally, a third pasuk, Yosef says, Shimuna. He says, please come and listen to me, my brothers. Let me tell you what I want to say. And what do the brothers do? We know what happens. It doesn't work out very well for him. They hate him even more, the pasuk says. This is a harsh startup. I wonder if Yosef HaTzadik would have used a softened startup, how that would have helped him or possibly changed his destiny. I don't think he had access to this research. Nonetheless, we do as married couples, and it's vital in relationships to use what's called a softened startup. And when and why would we use a softened startup? To battle what Dr. Gottman found the second predictor in divorce is the 4 horsemen. The 4 horsemen include criticism, contempt, defensiveness, and stonewalling. And if you're saying to yourself, wow, we have those, don't worry. Each of the 4 horsemen has an antidote. And the one that we're going to focus on today is criticism. And the antidote for criticism is a softened startup. The antidote for defensiveness is taking responsibility. The antidote for stonewalling is becoming aware of your physiological responses. And the antidote for contempt is building a culture of appreciation. Today we're going to focus on one skill and one, I should say, trick, in a sense, that will benefit you and your partner in enabling you to have an awesome conversation, feel validated, feel respected, and feel heard. And by doing so, softening the startup, we can mimic the masters and not mimic the disasters. In teaching these skills, the research has shown that Gottman and many of his fellows have done, has shown that there's a less than 50% relapse rate of returning to the same marital conflict compared to other therapies, this relapse rate is really unbelievable. We see couples really not relapsing and really using the skills that have been taught. How do we do a softened startup? No criticism, and we're only going to talk about our own feelings. So you would say, for example, I feel, insert the emotion, what you need from your partner, and in what situation. And by doing so, one will get their feeling across, one will discuss what they're in need of, and in what situation. This will actually increase the positivity in the relationship, other variables that we spoke as well about by using the sheet that I have attached here. But don't be careful not to turn an I statement into a you statement. For example, you can't say, I feel that you always do X, Y, and Z. You've now done a little bit of a trick with an I statement, and that's not what we're trying to do. What we're trying to do is strengthen our relationships, strengthen the relationships between ourselves and our children, and by doing so, we will create a stronger Jewish community together, and that is my hope for today, and hopefully you can take that home. Have an awesome day.